Hello, everyone, and welcome back to The Council. It's your girl, Cosette.
Lexi and Rachel.
And today, I always have some little thing to do.
What's your little quip today?
Today,
Cosette.
are we using emojis? Are we not? Texting etiquette in dating. Yep, that's right. We're going to talk about all the little signs that happen behind our keyboard.
Ooh.
What kind of texters are we?
Does this come to you naturally?
Yeah, it just comes to me off the top of my head.
Oh, behind the keyboard. That's so funny.
Behind the keyboard and into our minds. What kind of texter are you, Lexi?
Okay, like, okay. I think I think it depends on who I'm talking to. Like, as everyone can say, it always depends. Like, if I'm talking to my dad, who I know gives one-word answers, I also will give one-word answers. Like, he asked me, when am I coming home? And I'm like, oh, coming home this day. He's like, okay. Like, but out of my partner and out of my dating circle, I would like more. I like, obviously, a little more back and forth. I think all of us we communicate very well. And so I'm just one of those texters that I will always text my partner what I'm doing. So, like, if I'm going to the grocery store, doesn't matter if he's not home. I'm like, hey, going to the grocery store. Need anything? Hey, gonna go get this for lunch. Need anything? Hey,
I'm leaving the house.
Yeah.
Hey,
And,
I'm driving back home.
Hey, checking in.
I'm the exact same way.
I'm constantly just like, I don't need a constant flow, but I'm constantly, if an activity is changing with me, you're gonna know.
Get out of my
Yeah.
head.
Like, so I know. I was like, Rachel, I know you like. I just think there's always, why not? I don't need him guessing. I know he probably doesn't care, but I know that I communicate also in a way that I want him to communicate with me. So I would always love it if he's like, hey, leaving work for lunch. Even though, like, he's at work, it doesn't matter, but I would like to know. So I don't know what kind of texter that is. A communicative one?
Yeah.
A great texter?
I think you're, obviously we can't say your texting style from a romantic side, but from a friendship side, you are an extremely thoughtful texter.
Yes,
like very
you are.
detailed and
very
like
detailed, very attentive.
I
very
feel like
attentive.
recently I haven't been there, but I try. Like, I feel like I try to, if especially if I'm able to detect, like, because we have us three girls, we talk in different ways on many different apps. So I feel like if we're talking, like, say one of us is going through something on Snap, I will try to individually text or say, like, hey, like, if you need to talk on a live form, like, get on a call or text here. Because I think just offering a different way, I know we're going to talk about that, like, when to take it off of texting and when to do this. But I don't know. I just think, like, I think it's easier to offer more words than less words and give the other person opportunity that if they want to talk, they're there. If they don't want to talk, then great. But, like, it's okay for you to over express yourself and then they can react to that instead of me just be like, I'm here. And they'd be like, is this a safe place? Can I don't want I don't want there to ever be guessing when I'm texting.
Or
know?
like when
no guessing.
No guessing, literally. To add on to that, if you're sending a text message and there's 3 different questions and your response is yes back, you're like, yes to what? Like, just give me communication.
That whole thing with, like, men, if you give 3 questions, they'll only respond to the last one, and you're like,
Yeah.
it's so true, but I sent 2 others. I never want that. I never want that.
That's so true.
Yeah. Why can't you read the others? Why can't you look through all my messages?
I sent all of them. I sent 3 messages.
I just did it to be concise, so
yes.
Now do I have to repeat myself? Oh, yeah.
Literally.
But I feel like we're similar texters in that way. I think I use less emojis than Rachel.
Rachel loves her emojis.
I love emojis. So much could get lost through text message,
That's true.
Just like emotions and feelings and literally just the words itself. And, I feel like emojis are just a way to really express how you're feeling. And literally, I feel like I literally cannot live without emojis because it really displays my, emotions and how I'm feeling. And I want exactly what I'm saying to get received correctly from my partner.
Yeah.
It's important. It's important.
You brought up the whole thing about how you text differently depending on who you're texting in your life, and I just had this conversation with a friend at work the other day where we were talking about having immigrant parents whose first language is not English.
Yeah.
And how sometimes, and I think this actually goes for like a lot of like fathers in general, like where the text messages seem a lot more serious than they are. So like my dad will text me like on road, call immediately. Like something like that, and I'm like, oh my god, I'm like, I
Oh
feel
my
like
gosh,
now
I
we
would-
have the tendency of worrying so much, and then I'm like, is everything okay? And he's like, yeah, I just thought I'd catch up with you. I haven't
Like,
spoken
call
to you in a
now,
while.
I'm available.
Yeah,
Instead
call
of,
now,
like, calling
available
me-
now, like,
Yeah.
something like that. I don't know.
Or call me, period. It's
Yeah.
like, oh,
yeah.
I just wanted to check up. What?
Exactly, and so I
Not
think
what
that
your text said.
Yeah.
it's very different depending on like the generation of the person that you're texting in, and I feel like I definitely different people bring out different texting sides of me, but in romantic relationships currently versus like and also with my friends, I feel like I'm a pretty communicative texter.
You are.
However, I'm not like overly enthusiastic, I think, over text. Like I would much rather get on a phone call or send like voice memos or something so I can express. I don't know. I think that I've been in the case where I feel like the person I'm having the conversation with just is a bigger texter and like more enthusiastic, and so in that case it's you kind of just have to meet in the middle, and like I'll
That's
bring
true.
up my enthusiasm a little bit to meet, like I can very quickly learn if I'm like first dating someone. I very quickly learn a lot about them based on their
I was
going to
ask that question
Yes.
actually, like, because Rachel, when you said that you use a lot of emojis to express yourself and through texting, and if your partner who like may not use as many emojis, how do you balance that, and how do you, I guess, in your head say like, oh, they're still responsive, they're still caring, they just express it in a different way through texting. Like, do you ever have those conversations with yourself in your head, or like, I guess, are you and Bachelor similar with your emoji styles and everything?
I actually consider myself very fortunate because, in general, he doesn't use emojis, but he said he sees how much I love, communicating and receiving messages with emojis. So, like, at least if he sends me one message, there's an emoji in there.
Yeah,
and
your
it's
love
like,
language is emojis.
I love that.
It is. I tell him that my love language is emojis.
But that he observed that and he's like, hey, I don't use this often, but I am going to try to incorporate it when I can. And you're like, that makes the whole difference to me. Like,
yeah,
thank you.
literally, he's showing me that he cares and he's putting in effort that way, and like it's the small things that count,
It is the small things.
and it makes my whole entire day. It makes me
Texting-
so happy.
Texting as well. Like, Mr. Wright does not text very well. I mean, he is very, like, he's very involved in his job, so I know he's always on the phone. But like, if he's sending me a message, and he's at work, it's the quickest thing. Like,
Yeah.
oh, he'll say almost sometimes he sends me just a copy and paste of someone. If one of his friends are inviting us somewhere, he'll copy and paste a message, the text, and I'm like, did someone send this to you? Because it says like,
Hey,
go,
Diego,
yeah, hey
like-
Diego, go here, and I'm like, are you telling me to add this to our calendar? And nothing else will follow that. And then when he gets home, like, so what was this? He's like, oh yeah, these people invited us here or whatever. I'm like, okay,
A little
like,
context.
he's
would've
very
been nice.
like, so again, I think when you were saying like you read your partner, I've often lost the battle of me being like, you don't send me any messages at work, like I really like want you to be like, hey, checking in, and him saying like, I'm so busy, like that seems really a lot to me. I'm like, okay, the texting battle I'll put on the back burner, because in lieu of like how I feel love or communication, we live together, so it's easier for him to come home and be like, okay, like let's talk, instead of like when you're not living together, texting is like texting and calling is more important.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Giving that
So,
communication.
Yeah, so he
I-
doesn't text well.
Yeah, no, you guys definitely match very differently.
Yes.
Versus I think you and Bachelor match very similarly, at least when I see your conversations, like on how you interact with each other
Yeah.
over text message. It's very even.
Mhm.
I feel like I was in the place where I had been dating a lot of people who were older, like in their 30s, like mid 30s, and I felt like generationally with the age gap, they were not big texters ever.
Yeah.
And so I got used to people not being big texters at all, and just sending very like using texting as a means to figure out when we're seeing each other next, and then just talking in person. Like we would never be having conversation. I think like specifically in my last 2 serious relationships, we were never having full on conversations over text message ever.
I remember it was very simple and
It would
very
just be
dry.
like, "Hey, Tuesday 5, yes, see you then." Like full on boyfriend and girlfriend, and that's how we were texting. And so then I think on the 2 dates that I went on back to back when I first met Mr. Tennis, the first one was with someone in their 30s who was texting me like, "Hey, here's a plan. Okay, day of, just following up on my way," using texting as a means to just for logistics. And then there was Mr. Tennis, who's a big texter, who was like, "Oh, here's my sunset in this, like I'm on vacation right now." And I just felt like I was learning a lot about him over texting, which I loved the enthusiasm. At the same time, it was freaking me out a little bit because I was like, I don't want to
Such a
learn so
shock
much
from
about you
something-
before I've
Yeah.
even met you. Like, whoa, this is a lot. And
It's also the complete opposite of what you've been
complete
dealing
opposite.
with.
And so actually, we had recently just gone through our first messages. I love doing that.
Oh, that was
Like
so
we
much fun.
recently went through some of our early texts together, and I actually, in hindsight, was really proud of how I handled it because he was texting me a lot of updates, and I was obviously like responding and like being enthusiastic, but I wasn't trying to initiate too much conversation before we met in person because that's something that a boundary for
yeah.
me is that like I don't want to learn. I'd rather learn these things about you in person.
The
I'd rather
false
you learn
sense
these
of
things about
intimacy that you
me. Exactly, because I've learned that from
Mhm.
other situations in my past. But yeah, it's like I learned a huge shift, and so now that we're in a relationship together, I've definitely embraced more of the having that open style of communication throughout the day. And I feel like it's so great. And like the one funny thing is that we both always have our phones on Do Not Disturb. So I feel like we miss each other's messages a lot. And so when it's something important, like I'll just push it through, like notify anyway. And if it's something that's important, I'll be like, "Hey, I need a response to this," and he'll be like, "Oh yeah, shoot, sorry, wasn't I didn't see that." And I feel like we are able to use it as a way to like grow our relationship as opposed to just using it as a means to coordinate hangouts,
yeah.
which everyone
Which
has
is
different
I like
purposes for that.
I
So
like that.
what are some of our turn ons and turn offs in texting? Like what do you guys think if you were in early stages with someone? And I would say previously a turn off would be for me is like too much communication before we met, like asking too many questions. I would just probably shut that down.
Mm-hmm.
But that's like something that comes off for me. Turn on, it's like, okay, I asked the question, now I'm answering it immediately. I'm just giving you
No,
guys
tell-
time to
tell
think.
us.
Let's hear it.
A turn on, ooh, is probably uh oh, I love when someone like constantly reassures me over text message and compliments me. So like Mr. Tennis does a great job at that. Like, "Hey, just out and about and just thinking like, oh my God, I'm so excited to see you later." Or I was had such a great, and I'll try to like text him or like remind him, "Oh my gosh, this weekend when you made me breakfast, that meant so much to me, by the
Oh,
way."
I love that.
Like that's a turn on for me. Or he's done like he'll screenshot an Instagram photo of me and be like, "Oh my God, this photo of you is amazing. It's so beautiful. I love it."
That's cute.
And like I love that. It's like it's engaging, it's complimentary, and those are ways in which I feel like you can really use texting as a way to reassure each other and be present in
yeah,
each other's
texting
lives.
doesn't have to be boring and straightforward and routine.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be the same conversation of like, "Hey, how are you? Good. Okay, going to work. Okay, cool." Would like it doesn't have to be like that at all. You can send pictures of what you're doing. You can screenshot little funny things. You can say like you can use emojis.
Yeah.
There's not that that should be your only form of communication, but it doesn't have to. When people are like, I'm not a big texter, I'm like, maybe you're just not using it right because you don't. Texting doesn't mean you're on the phone constantly with the person. It just means you make use of that time with them.
Yeah.
And if that's like Mr. Tennis sending you those type of messages and pictures, then okay, great. Then we don't have to go back and forth forever, but we can like that really made my day, and that made
it's
me
a
feel
fun
special.
little
And
like boost up to be
yeah,
like,
like
"Aw."
those are the same things that's like definitely a turn on for me. When we had our anniversary, and I know I told you girls, but when I got a message from Mr. Wright at work, and he's like, "Be ready at this time. I hope you have something like I hope you're wearing your favorite outfit or something. Can't wait to see you or something." The commanding tone, but also like compliment, commanding tone, plan, even though it was like surprise, was such a turn on. I was like, "Oh my God!" Like you don't have
Gets you
to you don't have
excited.
to send me any messages, but the fact that you just sent me that message, just here's what's going on, be ready, can't wait.
Yeah. I
I
love
was like,
it.
it took less than 10 seconds to send that kind of message, and
And
it
you're
made,
still talking about it
and
now.
it,
Yep.
Like,
wow.
it made such an impact.
And
it
we're going
made
to talk
such an
about it in
impact.
6 months from now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
talk about it until our next anniversary.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, it's those types of messages that love it. Like, if we're not together, if we're traveling and such, good morning and good night messages. Rachel, I know we're on the same page.
Yep.
They
good,
mean
good night messages are so important.
I feel like
mean
at this
Tell me
so
point,
more.
if I
much.
didn't get a good night text, I'd be like, oh.
yeah.
Like, I feel like it becomes a routine that, like, you say goodnight to each other. If
We-
I fall asleep on you, like, I feel like, I mean, I try not to do that, but maybe there's been times where maybe it's my way of being like, I'm a little bit upset with you. But yeah, I
Maybe
feel
it's
like
intentional.
you get into that routine of,
You
like, the good
do.
morning and good night.
Yeah.
And
If you're
wanna
starting
do
to
that
see someone regularly, usually they're the last person you want to check in with and check out with, and
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
and so yeah, I depend on those, and I think we've made it clear to our partners that
It's
it
important.
means a
I
lot
need
to
that.
me, and
Then I can sleep
I
soundly.
was gonna say, like, the anxiety I feel if I'm away from my partner and I don't hear a good night message, I'm like, hello, I said I was going to bed an hour ago, but I'm not in
Yeah.
bed because now I'm
'Cause, like,
worried.
you didn't say
Can you
goodnight.
say something so I can go to
Yeah.
bed? Like, I wish it didn't weigh so much, but those are the smallest messages, and yet they make a huge
Yeah.
impact on me. Like,
What's actually so funny is this actually happened to me last night. So I ended up going to bed early because we were gonna shoot, our
Oh,
podcast
this is a recent
at
story.
Spotify.
I know.
And I said goodnight, and The Bachelor had the longest day yesterday, and he didn't say goodnight, and then I woke up at like 5 in the morning, like he didn't even read my goodnight message, and he didn't respond. I'm like, like that's very strange. Like this is not normal behavior. And then I'm like, I texted him good morning, like driving over to Spotify, and I'm thinking, I'm like, okay, it's almost 9, like he still hasn't messaged me. And then literally, like, right before I got here, I got a message. And it was like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I was so exhausted. I fell asleep. Like, so sorry, baby. And like a heart, like a kissing emoji. And I'm like, okay. So it went through my head. He could have, been so exhausted, which that's what I thought.
Likely
Or-
scenario,
or-
but one that doesn't
or-
cross. Yeah,
Or
you're like,
B, I overthought, is he mad at me? Like, is he not talking to me?
Yeah.
But,
which that's what the anxious mind does. It's
yes.
likely
Like, did I do
90% positive this is what's happening, but 10% sure it's
Yeah.
actually this, and now I can't sleep. Like,
Yep.
Like, I had a
That's-
thought in my head. I was like, is he mad at me? Like, for some
Yeah.
reason that I don't know.
And then you're trying to think of back everything that you did that could possibly have
and
upset
it'll
him.
keep you up. So if it just helps to have that good night.
Yeah, but literally when he
That's
said,
so funny.
when I
And you're like,
received
and
that-
good morning. You're like, hello.
yeah, literally.
There's no way I can record podcasts if I don't hear from you.
I
Like,
know,
I'm gonna-
right? Oh, I'm gonna think about this all day. But no, yeah, he said, good morning. Like,
So how do you establish this? Like, if you're just seeing someone, I think it comes with time. But at first, how do you? Is it just like a right away you hit it off texting or not? Like, say you've already had your first date, so it's not about establishing that connection. But you had your first date. Maybe you've had 2 or 3. How do you kind of? Is it playing around with your etiquette? Is it playing like? I guess how do you know if you're compatible texting or?
I think in terms of like cadence, it slowly goes up and up. Like even after like 3 dates, I don't think I was really texting updates throughout the day about what I was doing with Mr. Tennis. I like
Yeah.
almost said his name.
Ah.
But I need to feel comfortable enough with you, and I think maybe it's also something about exclusivity, because before we're exclusive, like I might be texting a few people throughout the day here and there, but I'm not like checking in constantly throughout the day, like,
Yeah.
oh, how did your job interview go? Oh, and
Yeah.
by the
Oh,
way, I'm running
sure.
to the library now. Like, I don't feel like you need a play by play of my day if we're just casually dating and we're
Yeah.
not like committed to each other yet. But then I think just over time, naturally, it will go up.
And
I
you
see.
know what? I think from past experience, I realized like when I'm first seeing someone and there's immediate constant texting straight out of the gate, it's so exhausting, and it's like so much gets talked about. So it's like, oh, when there is a date, like you already talked about, what they did this week, what they did like 3 days in advance.
Yeah.
And what really worked with me and my current relationship is when we did start, talking, it wasn't constant throughout the day, but let's say it was like 3 times throughout the day, once in the morning, once in the afternoon, and once in the evening. So like we still were constantly talking to each other, but we didn't feel overwhelmed, and it ended up. It was just. I feel like it's a great fit. I thought it was just a
Well,
really
I know, like, as soon as
non-exhausting
you started
way.
seeing, like, The Bachelor, I know that before things, that was a huge issue in texting and communicating with the people that you were seeing compared to this one. You never talked about it in a way. You're like, you felt always that you two had communication enough to make you feel at ease and
Fulfilled.
like, so I think if that's how you feel, then it's obviously hitting a cadence or like a
Yeah.
rhythm that works for both of you.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think
What rhythm would you guys prefer? Like, what do you guys
prefer.
think? Yeah.
So, like, you know, what I do appreciate about Mr. Wright is, and he's mentioned this before, like, if I'm about to go home and I just, you know, I know that he respects my time with family. And so I never feel pressured to check in with him. And I never feel like, okay, he's going to, like, send me so many messages during the day and I'm going to be constantly on my phone. And I really like that because when you don't live like in your home, you go home and you want to see the friends, you want to see your family. And so he's also a caller. So I know we're going to get into that, but like he prefers to call over text anytime. So if he wants to say goodnight, if he wants to say good morning, if he's waking up, he'll call me versus text me. He'll say like, "Hey, I just woke up, getting ready for work. What's up?" And or, "Hey, I'm going to go to bed. This is what we did during our day." So our phone calls are a little more heavy than our text during the day, which is okay with me. The more I've learned that that's how we communicate, but yeah, I feel like we save a lot of our big conversations for the end of the day. Just like naturally when he gets home from work or if we're away from each other, he'll just call and say like, "Hey, like this is what I had for dinner. This is what we did. Anything crazy? How's your family?" Like, so
Oh,
yeah,
that's cute.
it's fine for
yeah.
it works for me. Like
I like a phone call. I think especially when you are maybe having like a heated conversation over text, it's important to put a pin in it and be like, "Hey, let's talk about this in person." Or if you can't be talking about it in person right away, "Hey, let's get on a FaceTime call
You're
or a
right.
video or a phone call later and talk about this," because there's so much misinterpretation that can happen over
Yes.
And I
text.
think that's when
So
texting
much.
etiquette, there's no way
That's when
to
it needs to
be
stop.
Yeah.
there's no way to do it well when
Yeah.
you're having a conversation that gets heated or misunderstood. Like
Yeah.
that's when etiquette needs to stop and say like, "Hey, we need to do this in person," or like
We need
have
to
a
hop on
call
the
at the
phone
minimum.
or, yeah,
Exactly. There's
FaceTime or
an
in
amazing
person.
Key and Peele sketch. Do you know the texting sketch?
No. Oh yes, yes.
Yeah.
Do you want to hang out?
Do you-
Sure.
Oh yeah.
Do
yeah,
you
yeah.
Sure.
want it?
Yeah,
Sure?
it's like everything can be
yeah,
interpreted
It is
from
so
different
true.
ways.
Yes,
too. Like it's so
yes.
true. Like, do you want to come over? Whatever. And they're like,
Whatever.
Whatever.
What do you mean?
I
And
love
I
that.
think that's how I read text messages a lot, which is why I like the use of like even just like exclamation points or like a lot of Y's after hey or like the little kind of things that you can do in text message to make it a little bit more playful. But as a final note, how do you think you can communicate these texting preferences to someone when you're first dating? Like someone is first starting to date someone, do you think it's something that they just pick up on based on how you text? Or do you think it should be a conversation?
I still don't think it's enough. Like, I think maybe naturally you guys pick up a rhythm, but I still think people fall into the default methods that they're used to. If they're
yeah,
over
true.
texting or if they're not texting, they're not going to change based on like if you're texting them a lot.
Uh-huh.
So I think if you're just starting to see them, I love when we talk about how positive reinforcement and just saying
There you
like,
go.
"Oh my gosh, I really appreciate when you say good morning," or "Hey, I really appreciate when you check on me during the day," or like, "It really makes me feel special," or like, I know when you're first starting to see with someone, you don't want to do scary language like that, like, "Oh my gosh, it makes me feel so seen and like we're perfect." But I think if you're starting to see someone and you guys are texting enough, then it's okay to be like, "Hey, like I really love that you checked in on me," or maybe don't use love. I know there's so many trigger
Yeah.
words
Yeah.
that everyone's like,
Ah, we're like, okay,
you
wait, no,
scared.
let's
Like,
make that
no,
even
don't
easier.
use love.
Yeah.
But if you can just use positive reinforcement of like things that you like during texting, or like, oh, that was such a sexy message. Can't wait to take that off screen later, or something. It just like positively reaffirms like, oh,
Yeah.
a little flirty message during the day, or oh, a good morning, or oh, a check-in at lunch. And like you can kind of start to form out what they like. And if they're listening to you, then you'll see that. If they're not, then maybe down, like maybe after more dates, you say, "Hey, like when I text, I know we don't see each other that often, so like us texting means more, and I feel closer to you this way. So
It may seem so silly to you because it's just texting, but at the end of the day, if it's something that's important to you, it should be important to your
yeah,
partner.
and
Like
it
if it
is
is
a form of communication.
yeah,
Like
exactly.
it is communicating with your partner.
If
I
it's a
don't-
way that you feel seen or understood, then it should be important to your partner
it
regardless.
should be important to your partner. Your partner should want to make you happy.
Yeah.
And texting
Point
isn't
blank.
that hard, people. Like we're not asking you to be on your phone 24/7, but
Yeah.
if you're
Just give
saying
me 10 seconds.
it takes 10 seconds, say like, hey, I'm in a hopping into a meeting, won't be out for a while.
Yep.
Okay, thank you for
Boom.
communicating that to me. If you're expecting them to call, like,
Yeah.
if you're, I just think it's so easy. And
Yeah,
it's-
and letting
should
someone
be-
know exactly what you just said. Like, hey, about to walk, about to take a long shower. If you don't, or I'm about to take a nap. If you don't hear from me, I'm just
Yeah.
sleeping. Just don't want you to think I'm ignoring you.
It's not
Yeah.
that hard, and it puts so much anxiety out the window.
Yep,
Yeah.
true.
I think I can get triggered so easy. I'm like, is he mad at me? Because past relationships have taught me they're mad at me.
When
Like,
they're
if
not.
they're not texting me,
yeah.
they're mad at me, and I'm being like scolded. So now it's unfortunately like something that bubbles up in your body where like you said, like if I don't get a good night, I kind of go to that point where I'm like,
Did
is
I
he
do
mad at
something?
like
Did I do something?
did I do something?
Yeah.
And even though you're with someone who you're like, no, that's impossible. He would tell me, he would
Mhm.
communicate like
yeah,
an adult.
Yeah.
But now you're like, oh, if you say goodnight, it just helps me so
Yeah.
much. If you check in at lunch, it shows me you care. If you do
Uh-huh.
this, then I feel like we're on the same page.
If you text me in the morning saying you're going to be busy all day, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
That's
you.
a great point. Like if
It's
you're not able
easy.
to talk all day, that's okay. But send me a quick message like, hey, it's gonna be a crazy day.
But I'm thinking
let-
about you.
I'm thinking about you. Talk to you later.
Yes.
Like,
Takes 5 seconds.
Boom.
okay.
Okay,
Then
thank
I
you.
won't be waiting by my phone, and I will also go about my day as if like,
Yeah.
okay, we're not going to be talking. But again, if I'm waiting thinking, okay, he usually is like message me right now, or oh, like I can see his, if you have their location, I can see they're here. Why haven't he checked in or said anything?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Then I'll send
Agreed.
a message and be like, what's up?
Hey, like I see
Hey.
you obviously are out and about.
Obviously, I see you here. I haven't heard from you in 4 hours.
Yeah. So there's a lot of little
What I do.
nuances
What I do.
that comes with texting.
Yes.
But I think that this helps maybe people just curb their expectations a little bit, but
Yeah.
also come to a middle ground that works for both you and your partner when it comes to the cadence of texting, the
Yeah, I
style.
think we've showed like different, like
we're all kind of
three
different,
we're on
yeah.
different wavelengths with it, and it all works. Like it can all work, but making sure that you feel safe and not anxious. and-
Agreed. I never
Yeah.
addressed the wide shot.
I
but-
know we don't really talk into the wide shot.
But that's our episode on
Yeah.
texting etiquette. Thanks so much.
should we check in
guys.
with our partners after this?
Should we
episode?
all start texting?
We should.
Should we all just be like, hey, it's
Hey, just checking in on you.
just checking in with you?
I checked in at lunch.
Oh, you're better than we are.
I already checked in too.
Oh, cool. Cool.
Same
Of
wavelength.
course I have.
Of course it did.
I
We
wasn't
love
leaving
giving-
that to chance.
We love giving them updates.
Yeah, I've
We're
already.
different. We're
I was
all
like, I already
different.
recorded 4 episodes. Like already.
I did too. I did
Okay,
too.
I got a text message that I have to send after this
Yeah.
episode.
Okay.
Thank you guys so much for listening, watching. Make sure to follow us on Spotify. Give us that 5-star review. And see you next week. Signing off, it's Cosette.
Lexi.
And Rachel.
Bye.